Trade Ideas has a fantastic backtesting feature. Every single one of my setups in my playbook all started with like me seeing something on the screen, me seeing a chart and noticing a pattern that repeating over and over itself in the market. I've taken some, like 200% losses in my career. And luckily, that was when I was like much smaller and, I didn't, blow up my account. So I think that possibility of having an exponential unlimited loss is scary for people.
I'm a strong believer that it doesn't really matter which one you choose as long as it's one that, makes sense to you so that you can repeat and you can work on it, you can push from there.
Execution is like respected and valued, I think more so than it is even on the long side. Like on the short side, we value like laser edge, like super precise executions, and guys will often share their charts and like we really geek out over that even more so often than P&L. Trade Ideas is instrumental into me finding trades like during the day. And then, I would say just as important, it's helped me build my playbook from the backtesting feature.
All right, everyone, and welcome back to the channel for another trader interview. Today I have Justin from laserwolf.co. It's going to be an interesting conversation because as I was looking through his accounts and the way he traded, it was very interesting considering coming off of the short-only competition we just had, and we may do another one of those in the future. So I do want to chat a little bit about, the mechanisms of short selling and all of that, because as you guys know with these videos, I like to learn a little bit as well, and that's definitely a weakness that I have in my game is the ability to kind of short sell, especially on these intraday charts and these high flyers. So without further ado, Justin, welcome to the channel. Got to find my mouse here. There we go. Why don't you introduce yourself to the people for a little bit?
Michael, thanks for having me on. It's an honor. I've been using Trade Ideas, basically since I started trading, which
Nice.
was about 3.5 years ago now, I think.
Okay.
Kind of got started around the COVID, when COVID started, I think like a lot of traders did. And my dad got me into it. So I've been trading now pretty much nonstop. Like when I found it, I just fell in love with it. I'm sure as a lot of people do.
Mm-hmm.
And I primarily short sell. Like that's probably 95% of what I do. Mostly hard to borrow, small caps, and mostly intraday. I mean, I swing sometimes, but yeah, I mean, the vast majority of my trades are done intraday. I'm not a scalper. Definitely a position trader. So I like to, build into my trades. I like to add to my winners. I like to pyramid my positions. That's really what I'm known for in the community. I'm I'm all ears. I'm gonna have a Twitter account, pretty good following over there now, as well as a trading room that I run with about 50 guys that kind of trade similar style to me. So,
Cool.
yep.
Yeah, and one thing I did like, just mentioning your Twitter account, and again, it's right below our names here the whole time, but you're showing a lot of examples of entries and stop losses and where you got in, where you got out. So I love that. And, hey, I always love people who are using the product as well. It's definitely not a precursor to get on the show, but we definitely love to see that. So you mentioned right away that your dad got you into it. And so is your dad trading like you? Is he day trading, shorting low floats, or did he just kind of ignite the interest in the market more than anything?
My dad is, I think he'd been trading like since, I want to say the mid 90s.
Wow. Yeah.
So, he was like just on the kind of the start, I think, of where, you could trade from home, with like E-Trade and stuff. But no, he's a contractor by trade. He's not a full-time professional trader. He just kind of he knew my work ethic and my discipline. He thought that would be a really good fit for trading. And and I see how those two combinations have served me well up to this point. Yeah.
Yeah, discipline for sure. I like you mentioning that because to me that's the most important, right? Work ethic and discipline, because we're not going to be ones to pretend that this is easy and you place a couple trades and you go hang out at the beach. So I like that you were talking about discipline. So when it comes to that, and when it comes to kind of shorting these low float and these hard to borrow plays, do you have any tips for people? Because we recently on Trade Ideas had this competition where we're doing these trading competitions now, and the rules were you're only allowed to short. So of course, people are going to gravitate to the most volatile instruments in order to make those gains. And some of the gains were pretty wild, but we also noticed a lot of blowups. And we've done a couple of these competitions before, and the blowups generally weren't as bad, but it seems like there's something, it could be the fact that, you can short a stock and it can double or triple and really wipe you out. But it seemed like the people that were competing were having way more difficulty when it came to actually managing emotions and managing trades from the short side than the competition that we had before that, which was long only. So, you said you did 95% shorting, but do you notice a difference when it comes to required discipline for the short side versus the long side? And do you have any tips for people in case we do that competition again?
Yeah, that's definitely a multi-part question. It's a great question. I mean, number one, I would say that for people that don't short on like shorting, I would say it's not something that they do often. Like if they just kind of
Hmm.
dabble on the short side, I think that it can be really intimidating because they're always told that your losses can be exponential.
Yep.
And yeah, trust me, I've taken some, like 200% losses in my career. It's been a long time since that happened. Um, and luckily, that was when I was like much smaller and, I didn't, blow up my account. So I think that possibility of having an exponential unlimited loss is scary for people. That's one. Two is, um, you need to have a broker max loss always set up with your broker. I
Yep.
know some brokers don't offer that, but I would leave that broker and go to a broker that gave you a daily max loss because I know on the short side, like that's saved, myself several times as well as a lot of people that I know. Um, and then if you hit your broker max loss, like be disciplined enough not to call or email your broker and have them lift it for the day because your max loss is only as good as like you're disciplined to not lift it, right?
Hmm.
um yeah, I think with any kind of trading, it's easy to go on tilt, but especially with shorting, because if you don't respect your stop, then it can be easy to start to want to average into a trade to try to raise your average and try to get out of it that way. Honestly, like I am so against that, like adding to a loser. I just like made that a part um, of my ethos. Like I don't add to losers. I only add when I'm in the money, and that alone has saved me from big losses. Um, I see guys get into a really bad habit on the short side where they get bailed out from averaging to a loser, and
Yep.
it works 8, 9 out of 10 times, but all it takes is that one to, just blow past. And now you're on 2, 3, 4X size. And now like, weeks, months of gains just go, down the drain. So I would say, yeah, on the short side, you just need to be more disciplined than ever because, yeah, you're only, one stock, one move away from taking a pretty big loss. And even if you have a broker max loss in place, most people have a max loss, maybe 2, 3 days of green. I mean, you hit 2, 3 of those in a row, and I mean, you could do some serious account damage. So,
Yeah, it's
uh, yeah,
famously Paul Tudor Jones, which is obviously a very different trading style than what we're talking about today. He
yeah,
had a sign in his office, and it just said "losers average losers," and right, he would just it would so when he walked in the door every day, he would look and see it because that guy was
yep.
trading big money. But it's interesting that a lot of the same concepts, regardless of style, regardless of time frame, it all makes the same sense, right? You got to be able to know when to kill it and move on to something else. But what got you into the short side? So, there's a million ways to trade the market, especially when it comes to low float. I see a lot of consistency to the people that I'm talking to that do gravitate to that short side. But a lot of people seem to be drawn in, the fact that they can buy a stock and potentially it can go up 100, 200%. Whereas the short siders kind of take the flip side of that and say, well, I can only ever make 100%. But there seems to be an increased consistency. Was that what drew you to it, or was it something else entirely?
Mm, that's a great question. I would say It was probably early on when I was trying to kind of find out, find my path as a trader, and I just I joined Twitter, and
Hmm.
I just started following, accounts, and it seemed like the accounts that resonated with the most were the guys that were sharing their execution charts. And I noticed that on the short side, execution is like respected and valued, I think more so than it is even on the long side. Like on the short side, we value like laser edge, like super precise executions, and guys will often share their charts, and like we really geek out over that even more so often than P&L. So for me, I like that, and it just seemed to me it was easier to gauge like when a stock had potentially like reached an apex, and like I wanted to take that, back to reversion to the mean rather than like trying to catch a stock on the way up. So I think that that style just resonated with me more so than on the long side. So
Yeah, and I think that's perfect because I'm having lots of these chats with lots of different traders, and one thing that I love about it is they all trade a little bit differently, but that sentiment I hear over and over again is, I looked at a bunch of things, or I tried a bunch of things, or I went over and I saw a bunch of people's trading, and then there was one that just kind of, it clicked. It said, "Oh, this makes perfect sense, right? These are generally junky things, and they come back down, and that's what I'm
yeah,
gonna take the trade on." Because I'm a strong believer that it doesn't really matter which one you choose as long as it's one that makes sense to you, so that you can repeat and you can work on it, and you can push from there. So I would be remiss and on the Trade Ideas little podcast here. You mentioned that you've been using Trade Ideas since you started. So tell me a little bit about how you found us, and more importantly, what are you using in Trade Ideas? There's tons of different scans and scan types and all of this. What is it that you're actually focusing on when you're looking at Trade Ideas?
so yeah, how did I find trade ideas? I mean, just again, it was probably Twitter. Like Twitter, I would have recommend to any trader that's starting out on their journey that's relatively new. Like trade ideas is like a non-negotiable must-have. Like I can't even imagine.
And we're not paying them to say that, just FYI.
No, 100% not paying me at all. I've been promoting trade ideas on my Twitter for, ever since I started, and I couldn't. I mean, honestly, I couldn't trade without it. Like, I wouldn't know what stocks to be trading. So yeah, you can get like free top lists from most brokerages, but when you really know how to build a scan, and that comes from experience, but when you know, like, okay, I'm looking for stocks. Well, first of all, it starts, guys, with you need to build setups, right? You need to build a
Yeah.
playbook for yourself, and within that playbook, you have what we call setups, right? And several setups or multiple setups make up a trader's playbook. And a setup is nothing more than, like a trade that has criteria to it. And, you can back test those criteria so that that, your setups and your playbook have edge. And so, by back testing, and that Trade Ideas has a fantastic back testing feature.
Yep.
Like I would be remiss to not mention that. Like every single one of my setups in my playbook all started with like me seeing something on the screen, me seeing a chart, and noticing a pattern that repeating over and over itself in the market. And then I would, like jot down and make notes like, okay, like what do all of these stocks that meet this pattern, what do they have in common? What's the volume? What's the change in 15 minutes? How far are they up from the close? How much should they spike? And I just started finding similarities between them, and then from there, building a scan and then taking that scan and then back testing it on trade ideas. And then if I found some kind of edge, then I would take that further and back test it with a third party software for, going back 5 years to
Hmm.
see if like it really held up. So yeah, I mean, trade ideas is like instrumental into me finding trades like during the day. And then, I would say just as important, it's helped me build my playbook from the backtesting feature.
Yeah, and again, not to spend the whole time tooting our own horn, but I highly, uh, as a quant, right? This is a lot of what I do when it comes to back testing and to trading is to get a general idea with something like trade ideas that can very quickly test the last 3 months of data on any kind of setup and say, Here's an edge that's worth exploring versus, maybe you think you have a good idea, but it's confirmation bias or selection bias where you're just noticing the trades that work and ignoring the trades that don't. And then you end up putting it in the back test and you go, oh man, that's a really bad idea. So I shouldn't do that anymore. And then going from that to kind of refine your scan. So, without giving away everything you do, to get into the nitty gritty a little bit, are you looking for, runners on day one? Are you looking for kind of continued runners to short? What kind of filtering criteria are you using? Is it purely technical? Is there some fundamentals in there? From everything that's moving in the day, how do you narrow it down and say, okay, these are the ideas that I really want to take a look at shorting?
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I'll go over my top setups. I mean, I would say, yeah, number one, I would start with day one gappers, stocks that, have gapped up overnight.
Hmm.
I'm really only looking at gappers like, minimum 30% or more, higher the better for me. Um, so that's one. Two, I also look for day two gap up and gap downs. I would also, add into their first red days stocks that have been multi-day runners. The longer they've been running, the better. Using that feature, I really like to look at stocks that are up in 5 days. That to me is like a really critical figure that I look at a lot. How much a stock is up over a 5 day period. 10 day too, but for me, for what I do, 5 day is more important.
Okay.
Let's see. I also look at late day fades. So a stock basically after like 12 o'clock that has topped out, that's up a certain percentage during the day, and I look for a certain pullback percentage, and then for a bounce to then short into that. And then lastly, parabolic moves. I'm not huge on shorting parabolics, but if the move is big enough and it's running into like a really strong daily level, I definitely, that's one of my favorite setups to take.
Cool. Yeah. So that parabolic moves, I'm more of the second or the third day kind of thing because I always got burnt with parabolic moves as well. Um, how do you deal with halts? Right. I know that's always a scary thing when it comes, especially shorting these stocks. But as someone who's been trading since 2006, that never used to be like this, where you'd get these moves or these stocks that just open and halt and then open another price and halt. Do you avoid those entirely, or is there a play that you play around with those halts? Because I
Any,
basically, sorry,
yeah,
the reason I ask is we have the ability
yeah.
in trade ideas to scan and say, hey, this thing is halted and now it's kind of coming back from a halt. I avoid them, but I know there's some people out there that play with them.
Yeah, I actually have one of my scans alerting me right now, so I just turned it off. It was my subparabolic scan.
That's how,
um,
again,
so
I love that when that happens live because that's how you know people are really trading. When you see their eyes
yeah,
darting around the screen, it usually means they got a couple trades on that they're managing. Yeah.
yeah. So yeah, halts. First off, I am really, really cautious around floats under 2 million. Obviously, trade ideas, can give you float data, as well. But I always double check it on a couple sources. Dilution Tracker is one.
Hmm.
Finviz. There's a couple other sources. So I kind of like to look if I'm trading a stock that I know is fairly low float. I like to look at like three sources and to kind of take an aggregate from those three sources.
Yeah.
So anything below 2 million float, I'm always going to be like cautious, probably going to use smaller size, at least until like, I'm in the money on the trade. And then I can use my average, leverage my average. So that's one. And then two, I use Dosh Trader with Guardian, my broker. And they actually, on your montage, they have you can toggle it so that you can see the halt levels ahead of
Okay.
time.
So
Yeah.
you
So,
you
but
monitor and you say this one might be close to halting.
yeah,
Let me get out, or
100%.
yeah.
Yeah. Oftentimes on the short side, like let's just say, I'm getting in at something, at like $2.93. Like that's where my entry was. And I see there's a halt at like $3.10. I'm going to make sure I have a hard stop, like 1 penny underneath that. And, I'm going to have
Makes
to like
sense.
toggle that oftentimes that stop, play with it and pull it up as the halt level gets increased. Um, and honestly, I feel like I hate when people use the word they because I don't know if there is a they, but a lot of short sellers believe that the halt levels get abused often because you'll see oftentimes the halt level will be put at literally like 1 cent below the high of the day. And a lot of shorts, like we like to put our stops right above the high of the day
Hmm.
and or pre-market highs on a gapper. And so, I don't know. I feel like it's really ironic of all where the stop locations could be. It feels like very often they put it 1 cent below the high of the day, and then that's always tricky because if the halt doesn't get lifted and it's coming up right to the high to the halt level to the high of the day, no one wants to stop out below the high of the day as a short. Like you just don't. Like that's like a sin, especially like a few cents. So you kind of have to make that game time decision of like, is it really going to halt this time, or are they going to lift at the very last second, which they often do? And you kind of have to play that like Russian roulette game where you kind of sometimes if you call their bluff and they pull the halt at the last second, the stock will absolutely just flush out, and then you look like like a genius in front of your trading buddies. But if you're the one that's like if they're calling the bluff on you and it does get caught in a halt, and you have your stop above that halt level, that's even worse. So you kind of just gotta it's a trade by trade thing. It really is.
Yeah, and games like that with market makers have kind of existed since the
Right.
beginning of time. And I always people ask me all the time, hey, do I think that the market makers are manipulating that kind of stuff? And I always say they don't care about your 1,000 share order or 10,000 share order, but if they think there's enough of ten
Ooh,
thousand share orders out there, then yes, they might start to care. And they can't manipulate it, right? The people who think that there's they're manipulating like AMC down for the last 5 years, right? It's not that, but if it's within a
yeah,
couple cents of a level that they think there's a lot of shorts,
for sure.
that's a game as old as time, right?
Oh yeah,
And I think that's something that will always exist where people will look at that and say, man, if I just sell 100,000 shares, which for a large market maker or hedge fund is no big deal, right now, I think I can cause this thing to flush. And especially if I'm a hedge fund, I'm looking to buy a bunch, I'll push it to that level just to get those stops to trigger, and I'll be the guy on the other side buying it
oh
up.
yeah,
So, I don't
yeah,
think there's a big grand conspiracy, but it's a competition, right? And
yeah,
that's what I like. I like and dislike about trading is that when you come into the arena, you're against the biggest guys out there, and they're working for their own means, and if it means they're going to bully around some of us, then by all
yeah,
means.
definitely. I mean, along those lines, like just to kind of wrap that up, it's like I find myself more and more leaning towards stocks and moves that are like just less crowded in general.
Yeah.
So I've been trading honestly like less around the open lately, and waiting like until like 10:30 to really put any trades on, and that's been like really successful this quarter this year. Just kind of avoiding like because everyone's taught like the best time to trade is that first hour. Like everyone, you got to trade the first hour, and then after that, algos take over. Blah blah blah. In my opinion, that hasn't been my experience. So
No,
I,
and
I do
they
my best like a little bit later in the day.
yeah, the algos need a lot of volume. So when that volume dries up, they're going to just turn off or go somewhere else. I know a couple really successful day traders who are the complete opposite. They only trade the close. They trade, that after lunch period.
Yeah,
And the, I know a couple traders too that only trade pre-market and for that same reason. So it ends up being a bit of a game. Now, so I got two questions that I always want to ask because
yeah,
these are biased or because I want to learn. Profit taking. So I always think, and I always get questions from traders, and I really think when to take profits is probably like the hardest part of the game, right? You can come up with a setup, and you can come up with that setup the stop for it, and if you take the trade and you get stopped out, so be it. It happens, right? It happens all the time. The issue that I see a lot of traders have and getting into a lot of trouble is when to get out. And I think part of the problem is that it's there's no right answer. You've got to work within a bunch of wrong answers and try to find what works. So what works for you when it comes to taking profits? Are you out little bits at a time? Do you trail stops? Is it kind of gut feel? But when you get into a trade, how do you know when you're getting out and why?
Yeah, that's a that's a really great question, and I would agree with you. I think that exits are definitely the trickiest part for any trader. And I think that's the one that takes the hardest, longest to master,
Okay.
or I wouldn't say you ever really master any part of trading, but the hardest one to, I would say, like really get down.
Yeah.
Um, Also, with entries, you can be like hyper disciplined. Like today, I had, I think, three trades that I missed by, 3 to like 7 cents a piece. That both like would have given me, I think, 20-25% returns.
Wow.
Um,
Yeah.
I've gotten to the point now where it's like, yeah, so what? Like my reads were like amazing, they were excellent, and the fact that I, was that close to them, it was just luck of the draw. Like we'll get them tomorrow. Uh, so I can be super disciplined with my entries. With exits, though, it can be frustrating because you'll be in the trade and you'll have an exit in mind, and let's say if you're too disciplined for that exit, like it could possibly like rebound and curl and come all the way back up and like even take out your original stop. Or let's say you then by that point you moved it down, you moved yourself back into break even on your stop, and now you saw all this unrealized profit go away. Like mentally that can be really hard to deal with. So I used to be super systematic. I went through a period probably for about 6 months last year where I was like everything's going to be end of day, because I had done a lot of back testing on it, and I found that end of day covers, like you just couldn't beat it for a lot of my setups over the long term. But I found that from an execution standpoint, it was just too difficult to implement on a day-to-day basis, because as discretionary traders, we don't live in like, the monthly time frame. Like you could do it, sure, but for myself, I feel like, I live on a day-to-day, week-to-week, and
Yes.
when you see like several days in a row or a week where you had great unrealized return, you're up in the money 20-30%, and then boom, just all of it's just gone because like you missed your exit by like 2 cents. So since then, I've really like gone back to I'm very discretionary with my exits. What do I use for an exit? I use exponential moving averages, key
Okay.
ones, primarily the 200 on different time frames.
Hmm.
I use reverse Fibonacci's retracements for, I look for like the 68 and the 62 and the 78
Okay.
for retracements to take off. And then lastly, like intraday pivots from the pre-market, and even stronger on the daily time frame. So if I can get I can get confluence on all of those things, then even better.
So that's for targets, right? So you're saying that
For
yeah.
my exits, yeah,
Yeah.
for my
Okay.
targets,
Because yeah,
yeah.
I just always wonder between hard targets and trailing stops, and I think it's usually if you're short term trading, a target makes more sense, and if you're kind of long term trading, that's maybe when like a trailing stop would make sense. So you just look for areas in the chart and you say, hey, I think if the stock gets here, it will struggle for a bit, so I might as well just take my money there and move on to the next one.
Yeah, I mean, for me, like I need to have certain amount of range for me to make the trade worth it. So,
Hmm.
typically I'm not going to put a trade on that I can't get at least like minimum 15% on my return. Like I'm not a scalper whatsoever.
Yeah.
You'll never really see me take profits before 15%. So for me, yeah, I'm looking for, like probably for the first intermediate target, something where I can get at least 15%. And then a deeper target would be like 20 plus 25%, depending on how much range it has.
Perfect. I love that. Now, I should put this question earlier because I always put it at the end. It kind of leaves everything on a sad note. But I always like to talk to traders about their worst ever trade. And the reason that I like that is because there's always a lot of learning that I find comes from people when they go, because usually right away most traders go, okay, I remember my worst trade. This is what happened, and this is what I learned from it. And but I think although it's kind of sucks to bring up those old memories and those old wounds, but especially for new traders and for people watching this, I think the learning experience from a lot of these kind of seasoned professional traders and their worst trade really helps them kind of, okay, it happens to everyone, and this is what we do going forward. So can you tell me a little bit about your worst trade, about what happened. It doesn't have to be monetarily. It could just be, the dumbest thing that you've done or something like that.
Yeah,
And kind of how you learned from it, and how you grew from that experience.
sure. Yeah. For anyone that's seen me in a few other podcasts that I've done, this is a question actually that I get asked each time for the other ones, so they'll probably already know the answer. It hasn't changed since then. It was KZR, and it was June 22nd, 2020, three
I love
or
that you remember
22.
the day, and
Yeah, yeah,
that's common too. Is you're like, I know exactly where I was and what I
yeah,
had for
yeah,
breakfast and all
yeah.
that. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah. It was June 22nd, 2022, and I ended up just taking this short after hours on on a low float stock that was up quote too much, and
yeah,
started like scaling into it, and thought that it had really good resistance on the daily chart, and then it blew past that resistance, and now I'm like justifying why I'm still in the trade, and now I'm looking at next levels where it could possibly stop out, and instead of just taking the loss and moving on,
hmm,
like I'm like trying to average in and trying to get out of the trade, and it just keeps going higher, and I just completely lost. I lost the ability to make like a rational decision,
yeah,
and I eventually stopped like adding to the position and just like sat there kind of like a deer in headlights. And one of the dangerous things about trading pre-market or after hours is there's no halts. So for a short, like the stock can just literally keep running like, like 50, 100, 150, 200, 300%. I think that thing was up, at one point when I was still in it, like 400%, you know?
wow, yeah,
And I remember calling my good buddy at the trading buddy at the time to, like tell me what I should do. Like, should I try to like hold this and wait for it to crack? Or, should I just like take the big L, which to that point would be like 3 months of gains. And he like helped talk me through it and said like, yeah, you could wait and, potentially it comes back down to your average. But at the same time, if you don't wait, like it could make it even worse for you. So, finally we like together like made the decision. It was just best to just like, cut my losses. And I
hmm.
did. And from that point on, like I never have taken a short after hours, and I've never added to a loser. So those are two things that I learned from that trade experience.
Did you buy that buddy a beer or something at least? Because he seems like a good friend who will sit kind of darkest hour and just chat it out with you.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I didn't. He lives in Boston.
Yeah,
I'm here in Southern California, but yeah, I learned a lot from him. Shout out to JJ Fade. He knows who he is. Well-known short seller also on Twitter.
oh,
So
cool. Yeah, because it was probably the best move too, even if the stock turned around right when you got out and tanked, because kind of what you mentioned earlier, that sometimes the bad habits can work over and over and over again, and even reinforcing those bad habits, they can, again, even if it ends up making you money that you did the bad thing, it's like, okay, but what happens next time?
oh yeah,
Do you know what I mean?
100%. I mean, I have guys come in my room, and they'll do super well, and I call them cowboys because they'll come in and I can see like they just got that certain style where
Yeah.
everything that's up like they want to short. Like as soon as it hits the parabolic scans, it's like they get trigger happy and they're just like short. You know.
Hmm.
And like they don't stop out, they just like they just stay in, like, the stock can go 50% against them, and they get bailed out over and over and over again, and then it just reinforces that bad habit. Then they get more cocky, and then there's that one stock that doesn't come back down, and it just slaps them right in the face.
Yeah.
And I can't tell you how many people have come into my room with that cowboy style, and I've never heard from again. Gone.
Yeah, it only ever takes one, right? With trading, right?
Yeah,
You
one
could
time.
be doing it, you know, 2 months, or you could be doing it 20 years. And
Hmm.
if you build up an account, you build up a living for 20 years, and you go, full cowboy mode, as you say, one time in 20 years, you're done. And then not only, are you down a lot of your profits, but for some people, if your account's gone, then that's how you generate income. So that ends up going as well. So, um,
Yeah.
Yeah, listen, this was an awesome chat. I don't want to keep too much of your day here. So listen, where do people find you other than the tag that's been under your name all day? Where do you send
Yeah.
people, and do you have any last words for
Yeah, I would say, yeah. I mean, if you're interested in my style of trading, I trade on the short side, primarily, small caps.
them?
I pride myself on precision and teaching my method of using Fibonacci's, daily levels, and risk management above all. So,
Yeah.
if you like, what you're hearing today and you want to learn more, I would say go to my Twitter. I post my execution charts on a daily basis over there. And you can feel free to message me on that platform. You can also go to my website, laserwolf.co. You can read more about what we do over there. And yeah, that's pretty much it. I really appreciate Trade Ideas for having me on today. I love their software, and if you guys don't already have it, definitely I would get yourself some Trade Ideas.
Oh, we love that shout out. Well, listen, thanks for coming by. We appreciate it, and I hope to have you on again soon.
Thank you, Michael. Have a good one.
All right, talk soon. Bye bye.
All right.